the water of Lum that evening. The sun was sliding low behind the tree line, painting the surface in dull gold. A small boat drifted near Sunset Cove, its engine silent. Inside the boat were 4 friends from Atlanta spending a weekend, away from the city. Laughter had filled the air all afternoon, but as the daylight faded, the sound had quieted. Evan stood at the edge of the boat, looking down at the water. It was darker now, the light from above unable to pierce deep. Something about it made his stomach turn, though he could not say why. He dove in anyway. The water was cold for summer, a sudden shock that stole his breath. He surfaced quickly, shaking the water from his hair. His friends cheered, but the sound felt distant, muffled, as though something under the surface was pulling at it. Evan treaded water for a moment, then he felt it. A sudden tug at his ankle. At first he thought it was weeds, but the sensation was stronger, colder. He kicked hard, but the pull grew sharper. The lake was silent except for the faint lapping of water against the boat. His friends leaned over calling his name, but he did not answer. The pull grew stronger, dragging him downward. His chest tightened as panic spread through him. Beneath the surface the world was dark. Shapes moved in the shadow below, pale and slow. Something brushed against his leg again, but this time it felt like fingers. Evan tried to scream, but water filled his mouth. The cold was unbearable now, seeping into his bones. The last thing he saw before the dark took him was a pale face just below him, eyes open and unblinking. The water stilled. The boat drifted in silence. The sun rose pale over Lake Lanier. The next morning, a thin mist clung to the surface, drifting in long white ribbons. The search boat cut slowly through the fog, its motor quiet. Deputy Harris scanned the water from the deck. Evan's friends had been brought ashore late the night before, still shaken by what they had seen. Their stories were scattered, but all agreed on one point. Evan had gone under without a sound. The water near Sunset Cove looked calm, but Harris had worked the lake long enough to know calm meant nothing. Too many bodies had been taken by these waters, and too many never found. The sonar equipment on the boat hummed quietly. A screen flickered with shifting shapes beneath the surface. Most were debris and rock, but every so often something appeared that looked too large, too deliberate. The boat slowed near a deep section of the cove. The sonar pinged again. Harris leaned closer. A shape appeared motionless just above the lake bed. Divers went in the water, breaking the surface with a splash. The mist closed in around the boat. Minutes passed. Then one diver surfaced, shaking his head. Nothing. The shape on the sonar was gone. Harris felt the hair on his arms stand on end. He checked the equipment again, but the screen was empty now. The water was still. The mist around the boat shifted, as if stirred by something moving just beneath it. Harris looked out over the cove. For a brief moment he thought he saw faces in the water, pale and blurred like reflections. When he looked again, the mist had closed over them. By late afternoon, the search had been called off until the next day. Boats returned to the docks at Gainesville Marina, their wakes fading quickly into the still water. An old fisherman named Clarence sat near the pier mending a net. He had been on Lake Lanier longer than most of the deputies had been alive. His weathered hands worked quietly as he watched the search boats return. Deputy Harris stepped onto the dock, shaking his head. Clarence looked up with a slow, measured glance. "Another one," he said, though it sounded less like a question and more like something he had said many times before. Harris hesitated. Clarence's eyes were pale and sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen things the lake was not supposed to show. "They will not find him," Clarence continued. "They never do when the lake takes someone like that." Harris frowned. He had heard rumors about bodies never recovered, but it was just talk. Clarence leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think the bottom is just mud and rock, but there is more down there. Old roads, old houses, old graves. And some of them never wanted to be buried." Harris felt a chill despite the heat of the afternoon. Clarence turned back to his net. "Stay away from Sunset Cove after dark. The water is never still there, As Harris walked back toward his truck, he glanced once more at the water. The sun was sinking again, casting long shadows across the cove. The surface looked calm, but just beneath it something dark seemed to shift slowly. That night, the cove was quiet. The moon hung low and pale above the water, casting a dull silver path across the surface. A thin layer of mist drifted close to the shore, moving in slow spirals. Clarence sat in his small fishing boat, just outside the cove. He never went this close to nightfall, but something about the day's search had left him uneasy. He wanted to see the water for himself. The surface was calm at first. Then he heard it. A faint splash far off near the center of the cove. He gripped his flashlight, but kept it low. The sound came again, closer this time. The mist shifted as if stirred from below. A ripple moved outward from the center of the cove, though there was no wind. Clarence's boat rocked gently in the still water. Then he saw it. A pale shape just beneath the surface, moving slowly. It passed under the boat without a sound. Clarence leaned over the side, peering into the dark water. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment he thought he saw a face staring back at him, pale eyes, wide mouth open, The water's pulling at the side of the boat. Clarence pulled back sharply, nearly dropping his light. The face was gone, but the ripple remained circling the boat in a slow, tightening ring. The mist thickened around the cove, hiding the shoreline. The air turned cold. Clarence felt the boat shift, as if something heavy brushed against it from below. A deep silence settled over the water. Clarence gripped the edge of the boat, his eyes fixed on the dark surface. Then, from somewhere in the mist, came the faint sound of voices. Clarence froze, his hands tight on the boat's edge. The voices were faint at first, almost like the echo of a conversation far away. The sound drifted across the water, rising and falling with the movement of the mist. It was not the voices of his friends from the marina, nor of anyone alive. There was no laughter, no human tone, only a low, steady sound, like words spoken through water. Clarence leaned forward against his better judgment. The mist opened slightly, revealing the center of the cove. For a moment, the water there looked darker, as if something large lay just beneath it. The voices grew clearer. He could hear names now, though none he recognized. Each name was spoken slowly, then followed by a pause as though waiting for an answer. The water at the center of the cove began to swirl in a wide, slow circle. The mist moved with it, forming a spiral above the surface. Clarence felt the boat shift. Again. The cold beneath him was rising through the hole. He looked down and saw pale shapes beneath the water moving in slow arcs around the boat. The voices stopped. The silence was worse. From below the boat, something rose closer to the surface. It was pale like the shapes he had seen, but larger. The water broke for just a moment, revealing the top of a head slick and smooth. Clarence's breath caught. The head turned slightly, though the face remained just out of sight. Then the water stilled again. The mist closed over the cove, hiding everything. Clarence pulled hard on the oars, turning the boat back toward the marina. He did not look back. The morning came gray and still. The mist that had covered Sunset Cove in the night lingered low over the water. Deputy Harris stood at the shoreline scanning the cove. The search team had returned early, bringing more boats and fresh divers. The case of Evan's disappearance had begun to draw attention, but Harris had no answers. The water was calm, too calm. No sound of birds, no wind through the trees. As the divers prepared their gear, one of the volunteers called from farther down the shore. Harris followed the voice to a narrow inlet, where the water lapped quietly against the rocks. There in the shallow water lay a shoe. Harris crouched. It was a men's sneaker, waterlogged and coated in fine silt. A second object rested a few feet away, half buried in mud. A phone dot. He picked it up. The screen was cracked, but intact. When he pressed the power button, it flickered faintly to life before dying again. Something in the mud caught his eye. Harris brushed it aside with his boot. Beneath the thin layer of silt was an old fragment of wood, dark and warped. At first he thought it was driftwood, until he saw the edge of iron nails and the faint carved line of a letter dot, an old board. From a building dot, Harris looked out over the water. The cove was silent, but beneath the surface, the shape of the lakebed was hidden by the shifting mist and shadow. He felt the same uneasy pull he had felt the day before, like the water was waiting. The mist began to lift slightly as the divers slid into the water. Their voices crackled over the radio in short, calm exchanges as they descended. At first the reports were routine. Visibility was low. Silt covered most of the lakebed. Broken tree branches drifted in the current. Then one of the divers spoke again. His voice was quieter now. He had found something unusual. Harris leaned over the side of the boat, listening. The diver described the shape of a wall rising from the lakebed. Not rock, not natural. It was smooth and lined with wood planks, dark with age. The second diver confirmed. There were structures here. Foundations. The radio cut for a moment. Static filled the air. Then the first diver spoke again, but his voice was strained. Something was moving below them. The water around the boat shifted slightly. Harris scanned the surface, but saw nothing. The divers continued to speak, but their words were broken by more static. Then the second diver shouted. His voice rose sharply, before the connection dropped entirely. Bubbles broke the surface near the boat. One diver came up gasping, his mask gone. He clung to the side of the boat, shaking his head. His partner was still below. The cove was silent. Again, except for the faint sound of water lapping against the hull. The missing diver did not surface. The surface of Sunset Cove was still. The lone diver clung to the boat, breathing hard, his eyes wide and unfocused. Harris pulled him aboard quickly. "What happened?" Harris asked, but the diver only shook his head. His lips moved, but no words came. The second search boat circled the area, where the missing diver had gone under. Bubbles rose for a moment, then stopped. For a moment, then stopped. The rescue sent another diver down, but the water had turned cloudy. The silt from the lakebed rose in thick clouds drifting just below the surface. The sonar equipment picked up movement again. Harris leaned over the screen. A shape moved slowly along the bottom of the cove. Too large to be a person. Too steady to be debris. The shape circled once, then vanished. The mist began to gather again, moving in from the edges of the cove. The air temperature dropped suddenly. Harris could see his breath, despite the summer heat. From across the water came a sound. Faint at first like a ripple, but then clearer. A voice. It was the missing diver, calling from somewhere below. His voice calm, steady, as if he were standing on the shore, instead of trapped beneath the surface. The sonar flickered again. The shape returned now, directly below the boat. The water stilled completely. The voice of the missing diver carried across. The cove soft and steady. It came from beneath the water, yet it was clear as if spoken beside them. The rescue team froze, listening. The words were strange, measured almost like a list of names spoken one after another. None of them were familiar. Harris leaned closer to the water. The sound seemed louder here. He could hear other voices now beneath the first. Dozens of them weaving together in a low rhythm. The sonar screen flickered again. Shapes appeared moving just above the lakebed. Dozens of them drifting slowly in a wide circle around the boat. The mist thickened further, closing off the shoreline. The air was heavy cold. Harris felt the hair rise on his arms. The voices grew louder. It was no longer the missing diver speaking, but something else. A deep layered sound that seemed to come from the water itself. One of the rescue crew reached for the radio, but it crackled with static. The signal was gone. Then the water shifted. A pale shape rose just beneath the surface, directly beside the boat. Harris stepped back quickly. For a moment, a face broke the surface. Pale eyes, open mouth moving in silent words. It was the missing diver. Then the water closed over him again, without a ripple. The mist swallowed Sunset Cove completely. The shoreline vanished in pale gray. The rescue boats drifted without anchor, as if the water itself had grown heavier. The sonar flickered again. The shapes below were moving closer to the center of the cove. Harris gave the order for one final descent. A volunteer diver geared up, his face pale but steady. He dropped into the water, vanishing beneath the surface. Minutes passed. The radio crackled faintly. The diver's voice came through, calm but strange. His breathing was steady, yet there was no report of location or visibility. Then the voice changed. The words became quiet murmurs, not directed at the team but at someone unseen. The sonar showed a new shape rising from the bottom of the cove, larger than the others. The circle of pale figures shifted outward, making space. The radio went silent. The sonar screen went black. The mist lifted slowly. The cove was still again. The diver did not surface. The search ended at dusk. The boats returned to the marina without answers. Epilogue. Extract from Georgia Department of Natural Resources Report. Lake Lanier. Incident filed 202-3731 Sunset Cove, Georgia. Summary: on July 31, 2023, multiple divers were deployed in the search for Evan Carter. Missing swimmer last seen near Sunset Cove. 2 divers did not resurface. Search operations suspended due to hazardous conditions. Notes from Deputy Harrison: usual mist and rapid temperature drops reported during search. Audio anomalies recorded on diver channels. Sonar data showed unidentified structures beneath cove, consistent with submerged buildings. Status: boat is not recovered. Equipment and personal effects retained in evidence. Recommendation: suspend recreational access to Sunset Cove, pending further investigation. Final entry: August to 2023. Local witnesses report sound of voices over water at night. No verified source. Local forum post are George Outdoors, posted by user Lanier local_88 August for 2023. Title: Do not go near Sunset Cove. After dark. Body: I have lived by Lake Lanier my whole life. People joke about the accidents, but what happened this week is different. On Monday there were 3 search boats out near Sunset Cove. I could see the mist from my dock, even though the weather was clear. They stayed out until late, then came back without everyone they went in with. The next night I walked down to the water, just before midnight. The mist was back. It was thicker than I have ever seen. I swear I could hear voices coming off the lake. Not yelling, just quiet, steady, talking like a crowd far away. This morning I went down again. The water at the cove was still. No birds, no sound of wind. But in the shallow water near the shore, I saw something pale, just under the surface. It moved when I got closer. If you are reading this and thinking about swimming or boating at Sunset Cove after dark, do not. The lake remembers what is under it. And some things are still waiting. Some things are still waiting.